"Human, I'm all wet, and this is just the beginning," Quinn exclaims, her alien features twisted in a mixture of shock and amusement as she clings to Captain Nolan Bell's soaked uniform. The massive tidal wave recedes, leaving the human landing party and Xindi delegation drenched on the beach of Xindi Prime. Nolan's heart races, his arms still wrapped protectively around the female Xindi diplomat he'd instinctively pulled to safety. Their eyes lock, an unexpected spark of attraction igniting between them. As Nolan helps Quinn to her feet, he surveys the chaos around them. The HSS Frontier looms in the sky above, a testament to humanity's interstellar reach. His crew scrambles to regain their footing, checking equipment and helping their Xindi counterparts. High Counselor Zorn approaches, his elaborate robes now clinging uncomfortably to his frame. "Captain Bell, my apologies for this unexpected welcome. As you can see, our world poses unique challenges." Nolan nods, his military training kicking in as he assesses the situation. "No harm done, Counselor, though I admit I wasn't expecting such an immersive introduction to your planet's ecosystems." Quinn interjects, her voice carrying a hint of admiration. "Your quick reflexes are impressive, Captain. Not many off-worlders would have reacted so swiftly." Nolan feels a flush of pride, quickly tempered by the gravity of their mission. "Thank you, Quinn. Now perhaps we should move to drier ground and discuss the real reason for our invitation?" As they make their way up the beach, Zorn's expression grows serious. "Indeed, Captain. The tides of change are upon us, and not just the literal ones you've experienced." The group reaches a sheltered area where the Xindi delegation had prepared for their arrival. As they dry off, Zorn reveals the true motive behind their invitation. "Captain Bell, we face a threat that could engulf both our species. The Vex Empire advances, and we believe your people's technology and military prowess could turn the tide in our favor." Nolan's mind races, processing the implications. Humanity, still new to the galactic stage, now thrust into an interstellar conflict. He glances at Quinn, catching her worried gaze. The fate of both their species hangs in the balance, and he realizes that navigating these diplomatic waters will be as treacherous as Xindi Prime's tides. As night falls, the Xindi invite Nolan and his team to a traditional welcoming ceremony. The captain steels himself, knowing that the customs they'll encounter may challenge human norms and push the boundaries of interspecies interaction. Quinn approaches Nolan as they prepare to enter the ceremonial grounds. "Captain," she says softly, "what happens tonight could bridge our cultures or ignite tensions. Are you ready?" Nolan takes a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders and the growing attraction he feels towards Quinn. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replies, stepping forward into the unknown, both excited and apprehensive about the challenges that lie ahead in this alien world. As Nolan stepped forward into the unknown, the Xindi welcoming ceremony unfolded before him. The grand hall they entered took his breath away, its walls adorned with bioluminescent plants that pulsed with an ethereal blue glow. The alien flora cast dancing shadows across the faces of both humans and Xindi, creating an atmosphere of mystique and wonder. High Counselor Zorn's voice echoed through the chamber. "Esteemed guests from Earth, welcome to our sacred grounds. Tonight, you will participate in a series of challenges designed to test your strength, adaptability, and worthiness as potential allies." Nolan exchanged glances with his team, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Quinn stood close by, her presence both reassuring and distracting. "The first trial," Zorn continued, "is the Maze of Awakening. It will attune your bodies to our world and open your minds to new possibilities." As they approached the entrance to the maze, Nolan noticed the intricate patterns carved into the living walls. Vines twisted and curled, forming an impenetrable barrier on either side. The air grew thick with a sweet, intoxicating scent. Quinn leaned in close, her breath warm against Nolan's ear. "The plants release pheromones. Don't be alarmed if you experience some unusual sensations." Nolan nodded, trying to ignore the sudden warmth spreading through his body at her proximity. "Understood. Let's proceed." The team entered the maze, immediately enveloped by the lush vegetation. As they navigated the twisting paths, Nolan felt his senses sharpening. Colors became more vivid, sounds more crisp. He could hear the faint rustling of leaves and the quickened breathing of his teammates. Turning a corner, Nolan found himself separated from the others, alone with Quinn in a narrow passage. Their bodies pressed close in the confined space, and he became acutely aware of every point of contact between them. Quinn's eyes met his, pupils dilated in the dim light. "The maze affects everyone differently," she whispered, her voice husky. "How do you feel, Captain?" Nolan swallowed hard, fighting to maintain his composure. "I feel alive. Every sensation is heightened." They navigated the maze together, their movements becoming more fluid and synchronized with each turn. By the time they emerged, rejoining the rest of the group, Nolan felt a deep connection to Quinn that went beyond mere physical attraction. High Counselor Zorn awaited them at the maze's exit. "Well done. You have proven your adaptability. Now we move to the second challenge, the Dance of Unity." The group was led to an open area where several Zindi waited. Zorn explained, "This traditional sport combines elements of wrestling and dance. You will be paired with a Zindi partner to perform a series of coordinated movements." Nolan found himself face to face with Quinn once more. She smiled, extending her hand. "Shall we, Captain?" As they began the dance, Nolan marveled at how naturally their bodies moved together. The sport required close physical contact, their limbs intertwining as they executed complex maneuvers. Quinn's skin felt electric against his, every touch sending sparks through his nervous system. They spun, dipped, and grappled, their movements becoming more intense and intimate with each passing moment. Nolan could feel the eyes of the other participants on them, but he remained focused on Quinn, lost in the rhythm of their shared dance. As the dance concluded, an elderly Zindi approached them, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Your connection is most unusual." Quinn translated the elder's words, her voice tinged with excitement. "He says there's an ancient prophecy about a union between our species, a partnership that could bring prosperity and protection against external threats." Nolan's mind raced with the implications of this revelation. He glanced at Quinn, seeing his own mix of hope and uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Before he could respond, High Counselor Zorn's voice rang out. "Honored guests, we now come to the final challenge, the purification ritual." The group was led to a secluded area where steam rose from a series of natural hot springs. The air was heavy with mineral-rich vapors, and Nolan could feel his skin tingling in anticipation. Zorn spoke solemnly. "To complete the ceremony, you must immerse yourselves in these sacred waters. They will purify your bodies and spirits, preparing you for the deep connections that lie ahead." Nolan hesitated, realizing what this entailed. He looked at Quinn, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, they began to disrobe along with the other participants, their eyes never leaving each other. As they entered the steaming waters, Nolan felt a rush of sensations wash over him. The heat penetrated deep into his muscles, relaxing tension he didn't realize he'd been carrying. But more than that, he felt his inhibitions melting away, replaced by an intense awareness of Quinn's presence beside him. Their bodies brushed against each other in the water, sending jolts of pleasure through Nolan's nervous system. He struggled to maintain his composure, acutely aware of the diplomatic implications of their situation. Quinn moved closer, her voice low and intimate. "The waters are said to reveal one's true nature. What do you see, Captain?" Before Nolan could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the springs. A group of Zindi burst into the area, shouting and brandishing crude weapons. Quinn translated frantically, "They're protesters! They oppose the alliance with humans!" Instinctively, Nolan pulled Quinn close, shielding her body with his own as they took cover in the water. The chaos around them contrasted sharply with the intimate moment they had just shared. Zindi security forces quickly contained the situation, but the damage was done. As they emerged from the springs, the mood had shifted dramatically. Tensions ran high among both humans and Zindi, the peaceful ceremony now tainted by the threat of opposition. High Counselor Zorn approached Nolan, his expression grave. "Captain, I apologize for this disruption. Rest assured, we will address this matter. For now, let us conclude the ceremony. Tomorrow, we begin negotiations in earnest." As the humans prepared to return to their ship for the night, Nolan found himself standing face to face with Quinn once more. Their eyes met, conveying a wealth of unspoken emotions. The events of the evening had forged a connection between them that transcended their roles as diplomat and captain. Quinn spoke softly, her voice filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Until tomorrow, Captain, may our discussions bring our people closer together." Nolan nodded, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of both their species now rested on the delicate balance between diplomacy and desire. The complex interplay between personal desires and interstellar diplomacy. As the human delegation boarded their shuttle to return to the HSS Frontier, Nolan's mind raced with the events of the evening. The chaos of the protesters' interruption had shattered the intimate atmosphere of the purification ritual, leaving a tangle of unpersistent tension between him and Quinn. Back on the ship, Nolan headed straight for the briefing room. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen was waiting for him, datapad in hand and a grim expression on his face. "Captain, I've uncovered some troubling information about the anti-human faction," Chen began without preamble. Nolan leaned against the holotable, his uniform still damp from the springs. "Go on." Chen activated a holographic display, revealing a shadowy figure. "They're led by someone known only as the Shadow Mender. We don't have much on them, but their influence seems to be growing rapidly." Nolan studied the hazy image, a knot forming in his stomach. "Any idea of their capabilities or intentions?" "Nothing concrete, sir, but given tonight's incident, I'd advise increased security measures for our team." Nodding, Nolan straightened up. "Agreed. Double our surveillance and assign additional security personnel to the landing party. We can't afford any more surprises." As Chen left to implement the new protocols, Nolan found himself staring out the viewport at the swirling atmosphere of Xindi Prime below. The planet's beauty belied the turmoil brewing on its surface and in his own heart. The next morning, tension hung thick in the air as the human delegation returned to the Xindi capital. High Counselor Zorn greeted them with a strained smile, his usual composure visibly shaken. "Captain Bell, I must apologize again for last night's disruption," Zorn said, leading them towards the Grand Council chamber. "I'm afraid the situation has escalated." As if on cue, they passed a window overlooking a large plaza. Hundreds of Xindi had gathered, their angry chants audible even through the thick glass. Signs bearing anti-human slogans bobbed above the crowd. Nolan's expression resolute. "I see. Perhaps we should reconsider the timing of these negotiations, Counselor?" Zorn shook his head firmly. "No, Captain. Now more than ever we must press forward. The future of both our peoples depends on it." The council chamber was a marvel of Xindi architecture, its high ceilings adorned with bioluminescent flora that pulsed in hypnotic patterns. Nolan took his place at the center of the human delegation, acutely aware of Quinn's presence across the room. As Nolan presented humanity's proposal for mutual defense against the Vex Empire, he found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Quinn. Her eyes shone with interest as he detailed advanced human shield technology and adaptive battle strategies. During a recess, Quinn approached Nolan, her movements graceful despite the formal Xindi robes she wore. "Captain, a moment of your time?" They moved to a quiet alcove, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Quinn leaned in close, her voice low. "I've been tasked with giving you a tour of our military installations. It's meant as a gesture of trust." Nolan's pulse quickened at her proximity. "I'd be honored. When do we leave?" "Now, if you're ready," Quinn replied, a hint of excitement in her eyes. As they boarded a sleek Xindi transport vehicle, Nolan couldn't help but notice how the confined space amplified the electricity between them. Quinn's arm brushed against his as she explained the vehicle's controls, sending a jolt through his system. Their first stop was a massive shipyard, its scope rivaling anything Nolan had seen in human space. As Quinn led him through the facility, explaining the Xindi's shipbuilding techniques, they found themselves alone in a secluded section of the yard. The sexual tension that had been building since their first encounter finally reached its breaking point. Nolan turned to Quinn, his voice husky. "Quinn, She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and passionate. Nolan responded instantly, pulling her close as years of military discipline melted away in the heat of their embrace. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the facility. They broke apart, instincts kicking in as alarms blared and smoke billowed from a nearby section of the shipyard. "We're under attack," Quinn shouted over the din. Nolan's training took over. "We need to evacuate the area and secure the facility. Lead the way." They raced towards the source of the explosion, adrenaline pumping. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos. Twisted metal, injured Xindi workers, and fires threatening to spread. Working in tandem, Nolan and Quinn coordinated the evacuation efforts. Nolan's quick thinking and decisive actions impressed the Xindi military personnel present as he organized fire suppression teams and triage for the wounded. As they brought the situation under control, a group of masked figures emerged from the smoke. Quinn's eyes widened in recognition. "It's the anti-human faction." Before Nolan could respond, the attackers charged. He found himself fighting back-to-back with Quinn, their movements perfectly synchronized. Her Xindi combat style complemented his Terran techniques, creating a formidable defense. Nolan ducked under a swinging weapon, allowing Quinn to leap over him and take down their assailant. As they subdued the last attacker, their eyes met, a new level of respect and understanding passing between them. In the aftermath, they questioned one of the captured saboteurs. The Xindi's eyes darted nervously as he spoke, Quinn translating rapidly. "He says the Shadow Mender plans to assassinate High Counselor Zorn and frame us for it," Quinn reported, her face pale. "We have to warn him." They raced back to the capital, the transport vehicle pushed to its limits. Nolan's mind whirled with strategies, acutely aware of how much was at stake. As they burst into the council chambers, they found the negotiations in chaos. A tall, imposing Xindi stood at the center, her voice ringing with authority as she presented what appeared to be evidence of human treachery. Quinn gasped, "That's Vexara! She's the Shadow Mender!" Nolan stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din. "Stop! This is all a lie!" All eyes turned to them as Nolan and Quinn exposed Vexara's true identity and her plot. The Shadow Mender's composure cracked, and in a desperate move, she grabbed High Counselor Zorn, pressing a weapon to his head. Time seemed to slow as Nolan assessed the situation. Drawing on years of training, he made his move. In a blur of motion, he closed the distance and disarmed Vexara with a precise strike, freeing Zorn from her grasp. As Xindi security forces swarmed in to apprehend Vexara and her conspirators, Nolan found himself at the center of attention. The Xindi counselors looked at him with newfound respect and trust. High Counselor Zorn, visibly shaken but composed, called for a brief recess. As the chamber cleared, Nolan and Quinn found themselves alone once more. The adrenaline of the past hours crashed over them. Quinn moved closer, her eyes searching Nolan's. "Captain, Their lips met in a passionate kiss, months of tension finally finding release. But their moment was short-lived, as Nolan's communicator chirped urgently. Lieutenant Commander Chen's voice came through, tight with concern. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected a Vex Empire fleet on approach to Xindi Prime. They'll be here within hours." Nolan's blood ran cold as he locked eyes with Quinn. The Vex invasion they had feared was no longer a distant threat. It was here. "We need to reconvene the council immediately," Nolan said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "The alliance needs to be finalized now if we have any hope of withstanding this attack." Quinn nodded, her expression a mix of dedication and regret for their interrupted moment. As they moved to re-enter the council chambers, Nolan knew that whatever was building between them would have to wait. The fate of both their species hung in the balance, and time was running out. The fate of both their species hung in the balance, and time was running short. As they re-entered the council chambers, Nolan's mind raced with strategies. He strode to the center of the room, his voice clear and commanding. "Counselors, we face an imminent threat. The Vex Empire fleet approaches Xindi Prime as we speak. We must finalize our alliance now if we hope to survive this attack." A murmur of alarm rippled through the chamber. High Counselor Zorn stepped forward, his face grave. Captain Bell speaks the truth. We have just received confirmation from our long-range sensors. The Vex will be upon us within hours. Nolan nodded to Quinn, who quickly brought up a holographic display of the Xindi system. I propose a comprehensive defense strategy, Nolan continued, manipulating the hologram to show his plan. By combining human shield technology with Xindi weapons platforms and your intimate knowledge of this system's geography, we can create a formidable defense. As Nolan outlined the details of his strategy, he could see the Xindi counselors leaning forward, their expressions shifting from fear to dedication. When he finished, there was a moment of heavy silence. Then Zorn spoke. We have no choice. A vote for immediate ratification of the alliance? The Council's unanimous decision came swiftly. As soon as the vote was cast, the chamber erupted into action. Nolan turned to Quinn, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared purpose. We need to coordinate the integration of our forces, Nolan said, already moving towards the exit. Quinn fell into step beside him. I'll liaison with our military command. We'll need to establish joint communication protocols immediately. They hurried through the Capitol building, issuing orders via their respective communication devices. Outside, the city was a flurry of activity as Xindi citizens prepared for the impending attack. Nolan tapped his comm badge. Bell to Frontier. Deploy to defensive orbit around Xindi Prime. Coordinate with Xindi vessels to form a protective perimeter. As they reached the military command center, Nolan and Quinn found themselves surrounded by a mix of human and Xindi personnel. Engineers from both species huddled over consoles, working feverishly to integrate their technologies. Captain, a human technician called out, we're having trouble synchronizing the shield frequencies with the Xindi weapon systems. Nolan moved to the console, Quinn at his side. Together they worked through the problem, their movements in perfect sync. As they solved one issue after another, Nolan became acutely aware of Quinn's presence. Her arm brushed against his as she reached across to adjust a setting, sending a jolt of electricity through him. Hours passed in a blur of activity. As the defense preparations neared completion, a Xindi officer approached with a grim expression. Long-range scans are complete. The Vex fleet, it's massive, far larger than we anticipated. Nolan studied the data, his heart sinking. Despite their preparations, they were still vastly outnumbered. He looked at Quinn, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. Suddenly, an idea struck him. It was risky, perhaps even foolhardy, but it might be their only chance. What if we could make our fleet appear larger than it is? He mused aloud. Quinn's eyes widened as she grasped his intention. You're thinking of creating a holographic fleet? Nolan nodded, excitement building. If we combine human cloaking technology with Xindi energy manipulation, we might be able to project a convincing illusion. It could force the Vex to divide their forces, or even retreat. Quinn's face lit up with admiration. It's brilliant, risky, but brilliant. She turned to the Xindi officers nearby. We need to present this to High Command immediately. As they raced to implement the plan, Nolan and Quinn found themselves working in close proximity for hours on end. The tension between them simmered beneath the surface, but they remained focused on the task at hand. Late into the night, as they fine-tuned the holographic projectors, fatigue began to take its toll. In a quiet moment, Nolan found himself standing close to Quinn, their bodies nearly touching as they leaned over a console. Quinn looked up, her eyes meeting his. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. Nolan's hand moved of its own accord, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Quinn leaned into his touch, her breath catching. For a moment, the impending battle faded away. It was just the two of them, drawn together by forces beyond their control. Their faces inched closer, the promise of a kiss hanging between them. Suddenly, an alarm blared, shattering the moment. Vex fleet entering weapons range, a voice called out over the intercom. Reality crashed back in. Nolan and Quinn sprang apart, their training taking over. As they rushed to their stations, Nolan caught Quinn's eye one last time. A look of understanding passed between them. Whatever was building between them would have to wait. The battle for Xindi Prime was about to begin. The The tension in the command center was palpable as Nolan and Quinn took their positions, the Vex fleet looming ever closer on the tactical displays. As the first volleys of weapons fire lit up the space around Xindi Prime, High Counselor Zorn approached Nolan and Quinn, his expression grave. "Captain Bell, Commander Quinn, we have a critical mission for you both." Nolan and Quinn exchanged a quick glance before turning their attention to Zorn. The counselor outlined a daring plan to infiltrate a key Vex command ship and gather intelligence on their battle plans. Given their unique combination of skills and proven ability to work together, Nolan and Quinn were the obvious choice to lead this high-stakes operation. Within hours, they found themselves aboard a small, stealthy vessel, a hybrid of human and Xindi technology. As they departed from the frontier, Nolan couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and trepidation. He glanced at Quinn, noting the determined set of her jaw as she focused on the controls. Their approach to the massive Vex command ship was tense and silent. Suddenly, Quinn's voice cut through the quiet. "Vex fighters, 3 o'clock." Nolan's hands flew over the controls, initiating evasive maneuvers. The small ship darted and weaved through space, narrowly avoiding detection. Quinn's body pressed against his in the cramped cockpit as they executed a series of complex maneuvers, their movements perfectly synchronized. After several heart-pounding minutes, they managed to slip past the Vex patrols and dock with the command ship. As they made their way through the alien vessel's corridors, Nolan marveled at how easily they fell into step with each other, communicating with simple gestures and looks. They reached the ship's central data hub, a cavernous room filled with pulsing, alien technology. Quinn immediately set to work, her hands glowing with Xindi energy as she manipulated the Vex defenses. Nolan focused on hacking the mainframe, his fingers flying over his datapad as he applied human coding techniques to the alien systems. Just as they were making progress, alarms blared throughout the ship. Nolan's heart raced as he realized they'd been detected. "Quinn, we need to hurry!" She nodded, intensifying her efforts to hold off the Vex security systems. Nolan redoubled his focus, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked to download the critical information about the Empire's battle plans and fleet movements. The sound of approaching Vex soldiers echoed through the corridors. Quinn's eyes met Nolan's, a silent understanding passing between them. She moved to the entrance of the data hub, her hands pulsing with energy as she created shimmering barriers to hold off the advancing Vex. Nolan's datapad chimed, signaling the completion of the download. "I've got it! Let's move!" They fought their way back through the ship, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. Quinn's energy blasts complemented Nolan's precise shots, clearing a path to their escape vessel. As they entered the hangar bay, Nolan's heart sank. Their ship had been damaged by Vex weapons fire. "Cover me!" he shouted to Quinn as he raced to assess the damage. Quinn took up a defensive position, her energy barriers flashing as they deflected Vex attacks. Nolan worked feverishly to repair the ship's systems, his mind racing through possible solutions. With a final surge of energy from Quinn, they managed to take off, leaving the Vex command ship behind. But their relief was short-lived as they realized their communication systems had been damaged in the firefight. "We can't contact the Allied fleet," Nolan said, his voice tight with concern. Quinn's eyes scanned the star chart. "We'll have to navigate through that asteroid field to lose our pursuers." As they entered the dense field of space rocks, Nolan and Quinn worked in tandem, their hands brushing as they manipulated the controls. The close quarters and high-stress situation amplified the tension between them. A sudden impact rocked the ship. "We're hit!" Quinn called out. Nolan struggled with the controls as their small vessel spiraled towards a nearby moon. "Brace for impact!" The ship crashed onto the moon's surface, skidding across barren rock before coming to a halt. As the dust settled, Nolan and Quinn emerged from the wreckage, battered but alive. They surveyed their surroundings, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were stranded on an uninhabited moon, with limited supplies and no way to communicate their location to their allies. "We need to find shelter and assess our supplies," Nolan said, his tactical training kicking in. Quinn nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "There's an unusual formation over there. It might provide some cover." As they made their way across the alien landscape, Nolan couldn't help but marvel at their circumstances. Despite the dire situation, he felt a sense of confidence with Quinn by his side. The formation Quinn had spotted turned out to be more than just a geological oddity. As they drew closer, they realized it was an entrance to some kind of structure. "This isn't natural," Quinn said, her hand tracing the smooth metallic surface. "And it's not Xindi or Vex technology either." Nolan's mind raced with possibilities. An ancient alien structure? Out here? They exchanged a look of excitement and apprehension. Whatever lay beyond this entrance could be the key to their survival, and possibly much more. As they prepared to enter the mysterious facility, Nolan felt Quinn's hand slip into his. He squeezed it gently, drawing strength from her presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The entrance slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the unknown depths of the moon. Nolan and Quinn stepped forward, their footsteps echoing in the alien silence, ready to uncover the secrets that might change the course of the war and their lives. The alien structure's entrance slid shut behind them, plunging Nolan and Quinn into near darkness. As their eyes adjusted, faint blue lines of energy pulsed along the walls, providing just enough illumination to navigate the narrow corridor. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," Quinn whispered, her hand still intertwined with Nolan's. "The technology here, it's beyond even the Xindi." Nolan nodded, his free hand tracing the smooth metallic surface. "We need to find out what this place is, and if it can help us get back to the fleet." They moved deeper into the structure, the corridor widening into a vast chamber. At its center stood a towering device, its purpose as mysterious as its origin. Concentric rings of alien script encircled a pulsing core of energy. Quinn approached the device, her Xindi abilities allowing her to sense the latent power within. "Nolan, I think this might be some kind of transmitter. If we can activate it, we might be able to send a signal to our allies." Excitement coursed through Nolan. "Let's get to work." For hours they studied the alien console, trying to decipher its function. Quinn manipulated energy fields, while Nolan applied his knowledge of xenotechnology. Despite their efforts, the device remained dormant. Frustration mounting, Nolan ran a hand through his hair. "There's got to be something we're missing." Quinn's brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy signature? It's unlike anything I've encountered. It's as if it's waiting for a specific type of input." Suddenly, the air around them seemed to shift. The device emitted a low hum, and tendrils of energy reached out towards them. Instinctively, Nolan and Quinn moved closer together. As their bodies touched, the energy intensified. Quinn gasped, her eyes widening in realization. "Nolan, it's us! The device is reacting to our combined presence." Understanding dawned on Nolan. Our physiologies, human and Xindi together. That's the key. They pressed closer, and the device's core pulsed brighter. Quinn's hands began to glow with Xindi energy, while Nolan felt a strange tingling throughout his body. "We need more," Quinn breathed, her voice husky. "A stronger connection." Their eyes met, an unspoken agreement passing between them. Slowly, deliberately, they brought their lips together. The kiss deepened, passion igniting between them, as the alien device hummed louder. Clothes fell away as their bodies entwined, every touch sending waves of energy through the chamber. The line between physical desire and scientific purpose blurred as Nolan and Quinn gave themselves fully to the moment. As they reached the height of passion, the device erupted in a blinding flash of light. Energy coursed through their joined bodies, lifting them off the ground. In that instant, Nolan felt a connection to Quinn that transcended the physical. Their minds, their very essences, intertwining. The light faded, and they found themselves back on the chamber floor, breathless and disoriented. The device now pulsed with steady, vibrant energy. "I think," Nolan panted, "I think we did it." Quinn nodded, her eyes bright with a mixture of awe and lingering desire. "The transmitter is active. But Nolan, look." She pointed to a newly revealed doorway, shimmering with the same energy that now flowed through the device. As they watched, the doorway solidified into a swirling portal. "A teleportation system," Nolan breathed. "But where does it lead?" They dressed quickly, gathering what supplies they could. With a shared look of purpose, they stepped through the portal hand in hand. The world twisted around them, and suddenly they were in a vast underground complex. Rows of alien machinery stretched as far as the eye could see, humming with dormant power. "This must be the control center for the entire moon," Quinn said, her voice filled with wonder. As they explored, they came across a central platform surrounded by holographic displays. Nolan's eyes widened as he recognized tactical data scrolling across the screens. "Quinn, look at this. It's tracking the Vex fleet movements. And there, that's the Allied forces." Quinn studied the displays, her expression growing serious. "Nolan, I think I've found something. This console, it's tied to some kind of weapon system. If we can figure out how to activate it, we might have a way to turn the tide against the Vex." Nolan's heart raced with the possibilities. "Let's get to work. We need to adapt this technology for our allies to use." As they began to study the alien weapon system, a new challenge emerged. The controls were keyed to the unique physiology of the long-lost alien race that had built this place. "We'll have to find a way to interface with it," Nolan said, his mind already racing through potential solutions. Quinn nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "Whatever it takes, Nolan. We've come too far to give up now." As they set to work, the complexities of the alien technology pushed them to their limits. Each breakthrough required not just their combined scientific knowledge, but a deepening of the intimate connection they had discovered. The hours blurred together as Nolan and Quinn worked tirelessly, their bodies and minds in perfect sync. With each passing moment, the bond between them grew stronger, transcending the boundaries of their species. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex. Holographic displays flashed red, showing a Vex scouting party entering the system. Nolan and Quinn exchanged a look of unbreakable spirit. They had made progress with the alien weapon, but it wasn't ready yet. They would have to defend the moon with what they had. As they raced to the weapon controls, Nolan felt a surge of energy coursing through him. He looked at Quinn and saw the same fierce tenacity in her eyes. "Together?" he asked, extending his hand. Quinn took it, her touch sending a jolt of shared power between them. Together. They activated the weapon system, their combined life force powering the alien technology. As the Vex scouts approached, Nolan and Quinn stood ready, their newfound connection about to be put to the ultimate test. As the Vex scouts approached, Nolan felt a surge of grit course through him. He glanced at Quinn, seeing the same fierce commitment mirrored in her eyes. "Ready?" he asked, his hand hovering over the alien controls. Quinn nodded, her fingers intertwining with his. "Let's show them what we can do." They activated the weapon system, channeling their combined life force into the alien technology. The console hummed to life, responding to their touch in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. As the first Vex ship entered range, Nolan and Quinn worked in perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and instinctive. A beam of energy erupted from the moon's surface, striking the lead Vex vessel. The ship's shields flickered and failed, its systems going dark as it drifted off course. Quinn let out a triumphant laugh, but their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the complex as more Vex ships appeared on the tactical display. Nolan's heart raced as he realized the full scale of the approaching armada. "We need more power," Quinn said, her voice tight with concentration. "The weapon isn't strong enough to take on the entire fleet." Nolan's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on the alien chamber where they had first activated the transmitter. "Quinn, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." He quickly explained his plan. Quinn's eyes widened, but she nodded in agreement. "Let's do it." They rushed to the chamber, the sounds of battle echoing through the complex. As they entered, the air crackled with latent energy. Nolan and Quinn positioned themselves in the center, their bodies close. "Are you ready?" Nolan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Quinn's response was to pull him into a deep kiss. As their lips met, the chamber came to life. Energy fields pulsed around them, growing in intensity. Nolan felt a tingling sensation spread throughout his body, starting where his skin touched Quinn's. The transformation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Nolan watched in awe as his flesh seemed to shimmer and shift. Quinn gasped, her Xindi features becoming more pronounced, even as they blended with something entirely new. Pain lanced through them both, but they clung to each other, drawing strength from their connection. As the process reached its peak, Nolan felt his consciousness expand. Suddenly, he could sense Quinn's thoughts, her emotions flowing through him as if they were his own. The energy field subsided, leaving them changed. Nolan looked down at his hands, now glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. He could feel the power of the alien technology thrumming through his veins. Quinn's eyes met his, and a wordless understanding passed between them. They were no longer purely human in Xindi, but something new, a hybrid created by the ancient alien science. Without speaking, they moved as one back to the weapon control center, their newly altered bodies connected seamlessly with the advanced systems. Information flowed directly into their minds, the complexities of the alien technology suddenly clear. As they prepared the weapon for deployment, Nolan became aware of a larger battle unfolding in space. The Allied fleet had arrived, human and Xindi ships forming a united defensive line around the moon. He could sense the presence of Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen and High Counselor Zorn coordinating the defense. The Vex Armada entered the system, their ships a dark swarm against the starfield. Nolan and Quinn exchanged a determined look, their thoughts in perfect alignment. They activated the weapon. A massive surge of energy erupted from the underground complex, engulfing the moon in a shimmering field. Nolan felt the power flow through him, amplified by his connection to Quinn. The weapon fired, sending out waves of disruptive energy that washed over the Vex ships. The effect was immediate and devastating. Vex vessels lost power, their systems failing as the alien energy interfered with their technology. The Allied fleet pressed their advantage, human and Xindi ships working in perfect tandem to pick off the disoriented Vex forces. But the battle was just the beginning. Nolan and Quinn struggled to maintain control of the weapon, its power threatening to overwhelm them. They could feel their hybrid forms beginning to destabilize under the strain. "We need to go deeper," Quinn projected into Nolan's mind, "to fully harness the weapon's power." Nolan understood without further explanation. They joined together once more, their altered physiologies creating sensations beyond anything they had experienced before. Energy coursed between them, feeding directly into the weapon systems. As their connection deepened, so did the weapon's effectiveness. Allied shields strengthened, their weapons finding chinks in the Vex defenses with unerring accuracy. The tide of battle turned decisively in their favor. Vex ships began to retreat or surrender, unable to cope with the combined might arrayed against them. Victory seemed within reach, but Nolan and Quinn sensed a new threat emerging. A massive Vex flagship materialized at the edge of the system, the command ship of the Vex Emperor himself. Its presence loomed ominously, dwarfing even the largest Allied vessels. Nolan and Quinn redoubled their efforts, pushing the ancient weapon to its limits. But as they did so, they felt their hybrid forms beginning to falter. The energy that had transformed them was being channeled into the weapon, slowly returning them to their original states. The Vex flagship moved into position, its primary weapon charging. Nolan and Quinn realized with grim certainty what they had to do. "Together?" Nolan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Always," Quinn replied, her consciousness intertwined with his. They made their choice, diverting all power to the weapon, including the energy sustaining their hybrid forms. As they initiated this final desperate attack, Nolan felt his body changing, the alien alterations fading away. The ancient weapon fired just as the Vex flagship unleashed its own attack. Two beams of unimaginable power collided in space, creating a spectacular display of light and energy. The fate of both sides hung in the balance as the opposing forces struggled for dominance. Nolan and Quinn clung to each other in the control center, their bodies weakened and their connection to the alien technology fading. Yet their perseverance remained unshaken as they poured every ounce of their being into this last, crucial moment. As the energies clashed in space, the outcome of the battle, and the future of both human and Xindi civilizations, remained uncertain. Nolan and Quinn held on, their destinies irrevocably intertwined, waiting to see if their sacrifice would be enough to turn the tide of war. War remained uncertain, Nolan and Quinn held on, their destinies irrevocably intertwined, waiting to see if their sacrifice would be enough to turn the tide. Suddenly, a tremendous surge of energy pulsed through the alien weapon, drawing power from the very fabric of space-time surrounding the moon. The beam intensified, its brilliance outshining the stars themselves. Nolan and Quinn felt the last vestiges of their hybrid forms slipping away as the weapon channeled their combined life force into this final, desperate assault. The colossal energy beams collided in space, creating a blinding flash that forced the Allied fleet to avert their sensors. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the two opposing forces struggled for dominance. Then, with a deafening crack that reverberated through the vacuum of space, the alien weapon's beam pierced through the Vex flagship's attack. Nolan watched in awe as the energy tore through the massive vessel's defenses, breaching its hull in multiple locations. Beside him, Quinn's fingers tightened around his own, her body trembling with exertion. "We've done it," she whispered, her voice hoarse, but their victory was short-lived. The Vex flagship, though crippled, began to move with terrifying purpose. Its trajectory shifted, aiming directly for the moon's surface. "They're going to ram us," Nolan realized, his mind racing for a solution. His eyes fell on the teleportation controls, and a daring plan formed in his mind. "Quinn, we have one last chance." Without hesitation, they moved to the console. Their fingers flew over the alien controls, targeting the Vex flagship's bridge. As the teleportation sequence engaged, Nolan pulled Quinn close, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent understanding. In a flash of blinding light, they materialized on the Vex command deck. The scene before them was chaos incarnate. Alien crew members scrambled to maintain control of their failing systems, their biomechanical forms twisting in panic. At the center of it all stood the Vex Emperor, a towering figure of nightmarish proportions. Its multiple eyes swiveled to focus on the human and Xindi intruders, narrowing with malevolent intent. Nolan and Quinn sprang into action, their movements perfectly synchronized despite their weakened state. They engaged the Vex soldiers in hand-to-hand combat, their bodies remembering the training that had brought them this far. Quinn reached out with her remaining Xindi energy manipulation skills, disrupting the flagship's controls. The massive ship lurched, veering away from its collision course with the moon. Nolan, meanwhile, used his human combat training to disarm the Emperor's personal guards, their cybernetic weapons clattering to the deck. As they fought their way towards the Vex Emperor, Nolan felt a familiar tingling sensation spreading through his body. He glanced at Quinn and saw the same realization in her eyes. Their hybrid physiology, though fading, had left them with one final ability. They joined hands, focusing their combined will. A powerful telepathic message projected from their minds, piercing through the Emperor's cybernetic defenses. In that moment, the Vex leader experienced a flood of human and Xindi emotions. Love, hope, fear, and above all the unbreakable bond between Nolan and Quinn. The Emperor staggered back, its systems overloading from the alien sensations, its biomechanical form convulsed, sparks flying from exposed circuitry. Then, in a moment that would change the course of history, the Vex leader raised a trembling hand to activate the fleet-wide communication system. "All Vex forces," the Emperor's voice boomed, distorted by conflicting emotions. "Cease hostilities immediately. Full retreat. I repeat, full retreat." As the command echoed through the flagship, Nolan felt a familiar tingling sensation. The alien technology's fail-safe systems activated, teleporting them back to the moon's surface. They materialized on the rocky ground, collapsing in exhaustion as their bodies slowly returned to their original states. Nolan's vision blurred, but he could make out the shapes of Vex ships disappearing into hyperspace. The cheers of the Allied fleet echoed in his ears as he felt Quinn's hand find his own. Their fingers intertwined as consciousness slipped away, the enormity of their victory fading into peaceful darkness. When Nolan next opened his eyes, he found himself in the medical bay of the HSS Frontier. Quinn lay in the bed next to his, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. As if sensing his gaze, her eyes fluttered open, a smile spreading across her face. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and relief. Nolan nodded, his own smile mirroring hers. "Together." As they recovered, reports flooded in from across the system. The Vex invasion had been repelled, and the Human-Xindi alliance now controlled the ancient alien technology. Scientists and engineers from both species were already working to unlock its secrets, heralding a new era of discovery and exploration. Days turned into weeks as Nolan and Quinn regained their strength. Their unique bond, forged in the crucible of battle and tempered by their shared experiences, became a symbol of hope for both humans and Xindi. As they walked the corridors of the HSS Frontier, crew members from both species would stop to offer thanks and words of admiration. Finally, the day arrived for a grand ceremony celebrating the victory and the official formation of a permanent Human-Xindi coalition. Nolan straightened his dress uniform, his heart racing with anticipation. As he stepped onto the stage beside Quinn, he was struck by the sea of faces before them. Humans and Xindi standing side by side, united in purpose. As the ceremony drew to a close, Quinn turned to Nolan with a mischievous glint in her eye. She leaned in close, her breath tickling his ear as she whispered, "Human, I'm all wet, and this is just the beginning." Nolan couldn't help but grin, remembering their first encounter on the beach of Xindi Prime. But he knew she was referring to more than just that moment. A new frontier of exploration and discovery stretched out before them, filled with endless possibilities. As the cheers of the crowd washed over them, Nolan pulled Quinn close. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, sealing their commitment to each other and to the bright future they would build together. The ceremony concluded, but for Nolan and Quinn, a new chapter was just beginning. They found themselves on the bridge of a newly commissioned exploration vessel, preparing to lead a joint Human-Xindi mission into the unknown. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Nolan looked out at the star-filled viewport, his hand firmly clasped in Quinn's. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked, his voice filled with excitement and anticipation. Quinn's eyes sparkled as she replied, "With you, always." The ship lifted off, leaving the moon behind as it carried them towards new horizons. As they stood side by side on the bridge, Nolan and Quinn knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in love, purpose, and the spirit of exploration that now defined their peoples.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.